Welcome to the FangledCast, brought to you by the folks at Fangled Group, the strategy-first marketing and sales consultancy helping take your company to the next level and beyond. We help our clients convert every touch into voracious advocates for their brand. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the FangledCast. With our new look and feel, you'll notice the logo has changed. We went from Fangled Tech to the Fangled Group. It says a lot more about who we are as a company, since bringing disruptive technology to market is only part of what we do here at the Fangled Group. So today, I've got a new friend of mine, Wendy Pease. You got to say it right, like peas and carrots, not peace and love. And I'm gonna let Wendy beam in so that we can meet her and tell us a little bit about herself. Welcome. See, people don't realize that, in the age of COVID, we all had to be separate. Now we're in the same room, but virtually.
Yes, we are. And it feels so good to be right next to you, even virtually if we are.
Isn't it fun to play with technology?
I love it. I love it. All the fun things we could do.
And it really, sort of feeds into why we're doing this interview today, because lots of things that we're doing in the world has moved to this sort of technology. Like, for example, you know what? I'm going to communicate in another language. I'm just going to go into Google Translate and translate what I wrote in English and send it to a customer. Wendy's making a face because now I'm going to let her tell you why I'm being a jerk by saying that.
I am president of Rapport International. We connect people around the globe through high quality written translation and spoken interpretation services. The company's been around for over 30 years. I bought it about 17 years ago, and we have an absolute ball helping people figure out how to communicate across languages without messing up what they say with Google Translate.
Exactly. So for the reason I was being a little facetious at the beginning is, and I got to tell you this story. I haven't told you this yet because I wanted to wait for the interview. There was a gentleman that I used to work with who was the international director of a company, and unfortunately, he parted ways. And he decided, at that time, I was still working in Brazil, and he decided to send an email to all of the customers in Brazil to explain why he was gone, because he felt like, it was the right thing to do. He had a great relationship with the customers. So instead of asking me, he went into what was Google Translate at the time, which today is a little better. And he wrote a message that in Portuguese said, "The company thought my ideas were stupid, so they lit me on fire." That's what the translation program said. And I get calls from all of these people in Brazil going, Andrew, do you know what this guy just sent me? And they read it to me. And I to this day, I wish I had a copy of it, because we were roaring laughing. There is a huge difference. And the reason I've got Wendy on the show, besides a great contact for my viewers, if they need translation services, but to really, let's dig into the difference between translation and marketing copy in other languages that reflects the original, and all of the other things that you guys are capable of doing, so that when you go to market, you're not using an American idiom that's an insult in another language. I don't know if you want to share a few of your early stories of some of the bizarre oddities that led you to the way you run your business today.
When you're talking about idioms, one of my favorite ones is, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. That's what we say here in the United States. Well, I said that on a call, and I was talking, or I was on social media, and somebody from Nigeria wrote back and said, "Oh, that's so funny. We say, when life gives you peppers, make pepper soup."
Yeah.
So I hadn't heard of pepper soup before. So I Googled, Nigerian pepper soup, and one night I made it and we had fun with it. We didn't make lemonade with it too. We should have, but
in Brazil, lemons are green. So if you tell someone, paint it lemon colored, or it was lemon, there is a lemon called a Tahiti or a Tahiti lemon that's yellow, but Brazilian lemons are green. So
isn't it interesting? I didn't know that. So they're big like yellow lemons and they taste like lemons, not limes.
Yeah, the green ones taste like lemons. And then they also have the hybrid one that's like the expensive one, called, basically in English would be Tahiti lemon, which is yellow. But if you tell a Brazilian it's lemon colored, they'll say, "Oh, green."
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Love
there's,
that. See, I'm going to have to capture all these for our tidbits. We do a couple of
mhm,
times a month. We send out some fun information about the differences with languages and cultures. And that's what you run into with
yeah,
translation. With written
absolutely.
translation, you've got to understand the culture enough to be able to communicate that.
Yeah.
And fortunately, Google translates around because for casual conversations, it's fantastic. But for anything important, as your coworker found out, you can't use it.
Yeah. Well,
Much of a
poor
risk.
guy got lit on fire.
Oh, poor guy.
Yeah. It was, I mean, fortunately, the other thing that you know about Brazilians, they got a sense of humor and they all thought it was hilarious.
Right.
Nobody thought any less of him. They appreciated the fact that he made the attempt.
That's what's so important. I host the Global Marketing Show podcast, and it comes
Hmm.
up again and again. Just be curious. Just be curious, because if you make a mistake, people are going to help you out or understand. It's
Hmm.
it's the people who have a fear, who don't want to communicate across languages or cultures, that run into more problems.
Yeah. One of the things I really want
Mhm.
to dig into, because I have a method that I use, but I'd really like to know from the side of the folks who are doing the rewriting and the translating.
Mhm.
If I'm a marketing company and my client says, we really now want to expand into France, Germany, and Holland, so we're going to need these things translated.
Mhm.
Is there anything that I need to tell my current copywriting team? Is there anything that I need to do to prepare my copy before I send it to you to get more bang for my buck and get it done properly?
Yes, we recommend writing in a very good global English. And so, what that means is be clear, write short sentences, don't use idioms, don't use jargon, don't be extremely creative with your writing. Be very clear, direct to the point, don't use passive tense. You want to use all active tense. And think about writing clear, because that's much easier to translate. When we start getting into some of the compound sentences and multiple thoughts in one sentence, that can be very hard to translate, because it can be confusing in English, let alone going into another language. So that's the best marketing that you can do. Another thing is to be consistent with your translator. You also want to use the same person for your marketing translation, because in marketing, you use the same messages over and over again. And if you keep swapping out who's doing your translation, then you could have slight word changes or message changes that may be just as good, but they're going to be inconsistent in your marketplace. So,
Right.
for example, in the US, dinner and supper are used interchangeably. But if you have a translator saying dinner and one using supper, it's just not consistent.
Absolutely. What
Mm.
about languages? I'll give you an example like Spanish, where there is no universal Spanish. The Spanish that they're speaking in Argentina and Uruguay is more Castilian, whereas in Mexico, there's Mayan actually mixed in with southern Mexico. How is that handled in the translation? Have you had where you've had to translate the same language but in different dialects for different markets?
Yes, and that comes to the terms of globalization versus localization. So if I am a manufacturer of an industrial product that's going to be sold around the world, probably I can get away with one good Spanish, because it's like English from Australia, New Zealand, England, and here. If it's a good English and it's something I really need, I can read it and I can get the message from it. Yeah, if you're talking about running shoes or soccer balls, and you think about that just in the United States too. Like if I were going to buy a T-shirt with a football team on it, I'd buy the Patriots in New England. Whereas I live out in San Francisco or Washington, D.C. or any place else, I want to see the T-shirts with my local team on it. So that's the same with language. Then there's the consideration of, we're working with a company right now it's basically a startup and they're going international. So they've got a limited budget. And so they're not going to localize because
Uh, we,
it's a consumer product. and there goes so many countries, they're going to leverage their budget better and do one good translation and launch that around the different places that speak the same language. So there's a lot of considerations that go into it, and there's ways to grow into whether you're globalizing or localizing.
And one of the other things that comes up for us as we help companies create their global strategy is that the very value proposition can change from country to country.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, if you're selling furniture in the US, there are certain aspects of furniture that excite Americans in terms of the craftsmanship, in terms of, for example, cabinet goods with apparent dovetail and all that type of stuff. With sofas, they're hand tied. And then you go to South America and they don't care about any of that stuff. They want to know. So if we came with a project and we've got two different value props, it's very important for the person looking for the translation to let them know, when you're talking to the Russian market, this is the copy that we're using. And when we're talking to the South American market, this is the copy, so that it's consistent. Because the reality is you're talking about different things in different places based on what the consumer wants.
You know, that's so interesting, because I've been thinking about that more and more. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that in marketing, the value prop might be the same across all the countries. So when you were talking about the furniture manufacturer, you're talking about high quality in the US. Okay, so your value prop is going to be the same as the company within the company for the different countries, but your messaging is going to vary.
Well, no. What I'm saying, I'll give you an example.
Okay, and then I'll give you my example, and
Yeah,
we'll see if we can
So-
drill this
So
down.
when a Brazilian consumer goes into the store to look for a sofa,
Mm-hmm.
the thing that they value in being able to buy that American made sofa is that an American made it, it's imported, and it's prestigious. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
and there's a value in being able to say, when your guests sit on it, they're just going to love the comfort of it. In the US, the value prop has to do with the actual internal components. I want to know that it has 8-way hand-tied springs. I want to know there's a slightly different version of that, of what the consumer values in there. The fact that it's made in the US might or might not matter. The fact that there's hand craftsmanship, the fact that it's that it's assembled in a certain way, there's a slight deviation between it. The other aspect, another one where the value prop is different, I'm selling a piece of equipment that in the US people have been using in manufacturing for 30 years. So the market values the fact that the new one is an improvement over the old one and is going to give them new efficiencies based on the one that they're using. So they're going to upgrade. In
Mm-hmm.
a foreign market, they've never seen that tool in their life.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of it being an upgrade value, it's the core value of the fact that it's going to do something for me that I could never do before. So there is a slight difference in terms of, in one market, we're talking about replacement value. The other one, we're talking about just getting it.
Right. Okay. So let me give you an example of a client that we worked for, Staples. So their value prop is one-stop shopping for anything that you're going to need for your office or home office needs.
Yep.
And okay, so that's a value prop that works across the countries.
Right.
Their messaging, they did a tagline, and I love this example, is they came out with the make more happen. And they bookended it, and they put the more in the middle, and they wanted to take out make work happen, make fun happen. And one of them was make refrigerator art happen. And so that worked fine in the United States, because refrigerator art is the artwork that your child does that you hang on the refrigerator to give them credit and celebrate what they've done. Well, the French translator looked at it and she said, well, refrigerator art isn't a thing in France. Refrigerators are for keeping food cold.
Mm-hmm.
And so we could go back to Staples and say, this doesn't work. So their value prop stayed consistent, but their messaging was different. I think if a company does their research across the different countries that they're looking at, they're going to find overlap. So, you know, if you're talking about the American furniture maker, it's American handmade, high quality is what you're talking about. When you start getting into the joints and fissures and all that stuff, you're really coming down into the features.
Right.
So yeah, if you haven't if you haven't thought global from the beginning, you might end up having to do more research. But if you think global from the beginning, then you're going to have an easier time figuring out what their value prop is across the countries. And then you can make sure the messaging matches for it. And we have a wonderful case study on, it's a long form case study about Rotary International and exactly how they went through this, because they used to be a multinational organization and they do good work. And they don't celebrate, they don't want to self-promote, but they realized that they weren't getting new members. So they globalized their whole marketing, and they had to go around and figure out what it was they did around the globe that would ring true. And then the translation had to be done so it captured that meaning and that value prop appropriately in there.
That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's so important. People, what works here doesn't work there so many times. So it's,
right.
Between the idioms, between the value, between the otherwise, it's, and it's, just in the use of language.
Yes.
There have been things where I've been somewhere and I speak other languages and I just use the American expression. And not only wasn't it misunderstood, but it was insulting.
Right. Right.
It's very easy to say something that we would normally say, and in another country, it could be racist. It could be demeaning. It could be, so it's something that we all kind of have to look at.
Right. So that's why I go back and I say it's so important about who does your translation. If you do Google Translate, you get none of that cultural stuff. If you hire an agency that specializes in translating boxes and boxes or files and files of legal research to find, the one document that they need, they're running it through machine translation to get the gist for it. Or you may hire somebody that doesn't specialize in what you do. And that's why we've really driven down into global marketing and why I wrote the book on it. It's available on Amazon and all the places you buy books, because there's so many considerations with marketing that if you think it through from the start, then you can leverage your marketing dollars and your strategy a lot more than offending somebody or starting from scratch, which can set you so far back in your launch.
Absolutely. It's so important. And it's one of those things that gets overlooked. Now, when one of the things that's simple to translate, go back to that industrial market, is that sell sheet, which is, the list of all the specifications and things like that. If you're just doing that and you want to try it and hope that the Google gets the right word, good luck, because I've even seen people do that, and the word for volume ends up being volume of your stereo, not the volume in terms of how much capacity something has. So it all, and at the end of the day, even when I use services like your company, I then take it into the market and say, read this and make sure that we're speaking your language.
Yes, and we encourage people, if you do that, you have an internal staff member or somebody in the market to read it, then to bring it back to us, and we'll do the final stamp of approval. If they've made edits to it, sometimes it's simply a word, that they prefer. And sometimes they may do edits that change the whole meaning, and then we can tell you that, but it's to our advantage to keep your final document, because when we go to redo it, then we can build on that, just like you do with a writer.
Yeah. How many total languages is your company capable of creating copy in?
We do over 200 languages.
That's more than 199. I can do math too.
Yes, you can. Marketing person who does math. Woohoo!
No, I'll be running. One of them was running for president on that campaign, wasn't it? I can do math.
I can do math, really?
Yeah. So as we wind
I'd rather
up
I can do relationships.
yeah, I can negotiate actual deals.
Yeah.
So I always ask this question: is there something about you or your business I should have asked you that I didn't?
Well, we talked about the book. We talked about the podcast. So the Language of Global Marketing is the book, and the Global Marketing Show is the podcast.
Hold it up again.
Hold the book up again.
Yeah, and I'll put the link for the Amazon link when we publish this.
So, and it's about
Great.
how to translate your domestic strategies into international sales and politics. The only thing that we didn't talk about is the website. We have a whole learning center there. We're all over social media. So I'd love to have anybody connect with me on
Sure.
LinkedIn. Wendy Pease, like peas and carrots, but with an E at the end of peas. And on our website, we have a whole learning center. So you can go in there and watch vlogs and videos and look for case studies. You can just hit the search bar and search for the Rotary International if you want to read more about it.
Sure.
We do a lot with manufacturers in the US that have trouble hiring people, and how do they go about making their workplace diverse, inclusive, and hiring people who don't speak English and then training them and keeping them safe. The companies that I know that do that have a really loyal and productive workforce and aren't looking for employees. So that's a whole other area that has to do with marketing, because it's all communications and hiring.
That's very interesting. I wasn't aware of that part of your business. That's really cool. That's good to know.
Yeah. We have a case study on there, Boston Centerless, that talks about how they do it and how they celebrate the different cultures and how they promote people, how they keep it equitable. They're really, really impressive.
Well, thank you so much for coming on before I beam you out. And by the way, this is what happens when we beam people out on the FangledCast. Wendy's gone. So if you enjoyed the show, the conversation, tell a friend, fax an old person, they'll want to know. And we hope that you subscribe and like the FangledCast and continue back. And we will have some really cool programming coming up. See you all soon. Thanks. The FangledCast is brought to you by the great people at the Fangled Group, where we help you convert every touch into voracious advocates for your brand.